Justice or politics? On August the 3rd, former U.S. President Donald Trump was indicted for 4 felony counts over his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. This was his 3rd indictment. In April and June, he was indicted on charges with 40 counts for improperly storing classified documents and with 34 counts for falsifying business records, respectively. And the 4th indictment is on the horizon. Fannie Willis, District Attorney of Fulton County, Georgia, is wrapping up her investigation on Trump's attempts to overturn his election defeat in the battleground state of Georgia. Against the sweeping charges, a recent poll shows that voters are sharply divided along party lines. What do the numbers tell us? Was this about politics or the rule of law? What are the implications for the 2024 presidential elections? I'm pleased to be joined from Managua, Nicaragua by Benjamin Norton, editor-in-chief at Geopolitical Economy Report, and from North Carolina, the U.S., by Jeffrey Swartz, professor at Cooley Law School of Western Michigan University, also a former prosecutor, attorney, and judge. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Mr. Norton, let me go to you first. Trump has been indicted, as I say, 3 times so far and is facing 78 felony counts in total. How big are his legal problems compared with previous U.S. presidents?
Well, this is unprecedented. The reality is also that what Trump did was rather unprecedented. I mean, especially in this 3rd indictment, I think this is actually the most important case of the 3. Trump did try to overturn an election. He refused to recognize that he lost the election. And there's very compelling evidence in this 3rd indictment. For instance, the indictment has noted, for instance, that his vice president, Mike Pence, refused to go along with Trump's attempt to overturn the election. And Trump complained in this recording that Mike Pence was too honest, he said, which clearly implies that he knew that he was doing something dishonest. So, I mean, this really is an unprecedented case. I will say that I think in response to the 1st indictment, which involved Trump's allegedly illegal payments of hush money over the case involving Stormy Daniels, the adult film actress, there were people who said that maybe that was a pretty weak case. And then in response to the 2nd indictment, in terms of his holding confidential documents, top secret documents in Mar-a-Lago, his residence, there were some people who said, okay, maybe this is a more serious case and there's more room to prosecute him here. But I think in this 3rd case, a lot of people agree that this is the most serious thing that Trump did. And it really is unprecedented. He really essentially did try to steal an election.
Yeah, Professor Swartz, was Trump, however, getting some special treatment here? Because Biden's lawyer, for instance, also discovered small number of classified documents in an office Biden used at the think tank Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement in late 2022. Was Trump getting different treatment?
Not really, because Mr. Trump has not been charged with the idea that he had taken the documents or had real possession of them. The real problem was the cover-up. That was the obstruction of justice, that is the avoiding of the FBI's search warrant and not turning over the documents back to the archivist for the United States when it was demanded of him. So it really wasn't so much that he took them. In the cases of Biden and Mr. Pence, they didn't try to cover anything up. When their documents were discovered, they turned them over back to the government, and they even offered, and in fact, the FBI did come in and search their residences and their offices for more documents. So it's really more about the cover-up than it is the actual offense in that particular case.
Still with you, Professor Swartz, the latest indictment was handed down. I mean, the 3rd indictment was handed down by a special grand jury in Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation. In this case, how neutral is the special counsel? What do we know?
Well, the special counsel used to be an employee of the Department of Justice, and then he left and he went to work for the World Court in The Hague. He is a very independent type of guy. He has always been that way, even with the DOJ. And I think that in this particular case, he was the right person to push these investigations forward. I think that he's worked very carefully. He has gone step by step on these indictments, and I think his cases, the two that he has filed, are both very strong. What you're seeing in these cases, though, is the difference between a judge who is leaning towards Mr. Trump and doing everything he can to help him, and that's in the documents case, and a judge from Washington, D.C., who is, I think, very prepared to push her case to trial as quickly as they possibly can, still protecting Mr. Trump's constitutional rights.
Mr. Norton, the federal judge in the third indictment was reportedly randomly assigned to oversee the proceedings, and her name is Tanya Chutkan. She was appointed, however, by former U.S. President Barack Obama. So how can people be assured that she could be neutral?
Well, the reality is that this is getting at the heart of a big problem in the United States, which is just how politicized the judicial system is. And essentially, every time a president comes in, one of the main promises they make to a lot of their constituents is that they're going to appoint as many judges as possible, going up to the Supreme Court, of course. So really, I think your question really hits the nail on the head. The issue in the United States is how extremely partisan all of the opinions on all of these cases are. I mean, in terms of Republicans think that everything is rigged against Trump and this is a show trial. Democrats largely agree that the proceedings are completely fair and there's nothing that can be criticized about them. And I do have to say that, I mean, these two sides are not exactly equal. We should stress that among the Republicans, there are polls that show that among Republican voters, a majority of people think that Joe Biden was not legitimately elected, that actually Trump won the election and it was stolen from him. So what we see is a major crisis of confidence in the institutional framework of the United States. I mean, there is no evidence that Trump won the election and it was stolen by Biden. It's not true. But a large number, tens of millions of people in the United States believe this, and it's reflected in the fact that there's this crisis of confidence in institutions like the judicial system itself.
Professor Swartz, given the kind of polarization and the lack of trust, which is evident, shouldn't there have been more care being taken by the current administration to avoid suspicion of partisan politics in the cases against Trump in the run-up to the elections?
All, I think that has been done. That's why Merrick Garland and the Maine Department of Justice disqualified themselves from the case, and Mr. Smith was brought back as a special prosecutor, given his own staff. He wasn't in any way, shape, or form vetoed by the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice gave him all the help that he needed. They gave him all the money he needed, and he sought and followed the evidence where the evidence took him. One of the main things that makes this very fair, and you have to look at it, the witnesses against Mr. Trump are all former members of his administration, or they are people he appointed to his administration, or they are his former lawyers. They are the people that are, in fact, giving up the evidence against him. So I understand why people feel that way, but I think that in this particular instance, I don't think we can say this is any failure of the American judicial system, because, in fact, this particular judge was appointed to handle this case by what's called a blind draw. And having been involved in it, I will tell you that there's no way to rig it. The only way that a case goes back to another judge or gets assigned specifically to a judge is if they've handled that defendant before, or they have a pending case involving those parties. Otherwise, that just doesn't happen. And a computer does this. A person doesn't do this. The computer does this. And it's meant to even out the number of cases that go to every judge. So I have no problem with the blind draw in this case.
So do you think, Professor Swartz, that there are a huge divide and a huge taint of politics, at least the trust is not there? What do you think has to be done to repair that, and at this critical moment?
I would point to what happened to this country 50 years ago with Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was a very corrupt man who was forced out of the presidency because he was about to be impeached. He should have been charged. He should have been indicted. He should have gone to trial. And if after that Gerald Ford wanted to pardon him, that would have been the time. This country was so divided as it is today, over whether Richard Nixon was guilty of the things that they said he was until the tapes came out and until the people from his administration rolled over and said, this is what he has done. And then they became united. And when they were united, they wanted him out. I think more people wanted him charged and punished at that point, and Gerald Ford took that away. If Gerald Ford had not pardoned him and allowed the process to play out, we wouldn't be having the kind of debate we're having today.
Mr. Norton, do you agree?
No, I do agree. I think those are very compelling points. And I think that if you do have to compare Trump to a previous U.S. president, Nixon is pretty comparable. Although I would say that, I mean, what Nixon was accused of, and there's a lot of evidence showing, especially in the hacking of the DNC, the Democratic Party's office, to get information on his opponent in the upcoming elections. I mean, what Trump did is actually even more unprecedented. And I think the third indictment, in my view, really stands alone compared to the other two. There's, I think, been a lot of justified criticism of the first indictment, which has the most, I mean, dozens of charges against Trump, of felony charges. But this third indictment, I think, is really important because what Trump did with trying to essentially steal the election and basically launch a coup can be used as a precedent for...
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Norton. 20 seconds, really. But as high as 86% of Republicans believe, this was trying to stop Trump campaign.
Yeah, well, this is exactly the institutional crisis that we see in the United States, where tens of millions of people do not have confidence in really any institution in the U.S. government, and it's completely partisan. So I think the real danger going forward is that has established a precedent now, and Republicans are going to try to go after every single Democratic president, and we can expect potentially Democrats going after Republicans. I mean, we're seeing really kind of a breakdown of institutional confidence in the U.S. government itself.
We have to leave it there, but we'll keep a close watch on the situation. Many thanks to Benjamin Norton and Jeffrey Swartz for joining us. And with that, we are going to leave it there for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.